The unexpected rescue. The jungle was alive with strange sounds, whispers of the wind through alien trees, distant howls of unknown creatures, and the rustling of thick undergrowth. Captain Ray Carter moved carefully through the dense foliage, his boots pressing softly into the damp soil. His breathing was steady, his senses sharp. He had been on this planet for weeks, studying its environment, mapping its terrain, and gathering samples for research. But today, something felt different. A faint, pained whimper reached his ears. He froze. It was barely audible, almost lost in the jungle's natural symphony. But he knew what he had heard. It wasn't the cry of a typical jungle beast. It was something else, something suffering. Ray pushed forward, stepping over tangled roots and ducking under low-hanging vines. The sound grew louder, desperate. His pulse quickened. He had seen enough wounded animals in his time, and he knew that most were too far gone to help. But he couldn't just walk away. Then he saw it. Lying between two large trees, half hidden beneath thick leaves, was a creature unlike any he had ever seen. It was covered in deep black fur with streaks of shimmering silver running along its body. It had a long, slender form, almost feline but larger, and its breathing was shallow, weak. A deep gash ran down its side, glowing faintly with an eerie golden hue. Ray took a cautious step forward. The creature's eyes fluttered open, brilliant golden eyes that seemed almost too intelligent. They locked onto him, filled with pain, but also something else. Recognition, understanding. He crouched down slowly, hands open, trying not to startle it. "Easy there," he murmured. "I'm not gonna hurt you." The creature's breathing hitched. It tried to move, but its body was too weak. It was dying. Ray glanced around. There were no signs of a predator nearby, but that didn't mean one wasn't watching. Whatever had injured this creature might still be out there. He had two choices: leave it to die or take a risk and help. For him, there was never really a choice. Slinging his rifle over his back, he reached for his pack, pulling out a small medical kit. He moved cautiously, hands steady. The creature didn't resist, though its body trembled as he carefully examined the wound. The strange golden glow from the gash was unsettling, but the injury itself seemed deep, like it had been struck by a blade rather than claws or teeth. That was odd. No wild animal used weapons. Ray didn't have time to dwell on that. He grabbed a sterilized cloth and pressed it against the wound, applying gentle pressure. The creature let out a low, pained whimper, but didn't try to escape. "Hang in there," Ray muttered, reaching for a bandage. He worked quickly, sealing the wound as best he could. The bleeding slowed, but the creature was still dangerously weak. It needed rest, maybe even more medical attention than he could provide. Ray hesitated for only a moment before making his decision. He couldn't leave it here. With a deep breath, he gently scooped the creature into his arms. It was heavier than he expected, its body strangely warm, almost too warm for a normal animal. Its breathing was shallow, but steady. It didn't resist as he carried it back toward his camp. By the time he reached his shelter, the sky had darkened, and the distant roars of alien wildlife echoed through the jungle. He carefully laid the creature down on a soft pile of fabric inside his tent. Its golden eyes flickered open for a moment, locking onto him once more. Ray sighed, shaking his head. "You better not bite me when you wake up," he muttered, setting up a small heat lamp nearby to keep it warm. For hours, he watched over it, making sure its condition didn't worsen. Occasionally, its body twitched, as if in pain, or maybe in a dream. Then, something strange happened. In the dim light of his tent, he noticed the wound beginning to change. The golden glow pulsed faintly, and the skin beneath the bandage seemed to be repairing itself. Ray narrowed his eyes. That wasn't normal. No animal he had ever seen could heal like that. What exactly had he just staved? His thoughts were interrupted when the creature suddenly stirred. Its breathing deepened, and its body shifted slightly. Then, before he could react, Its shape began to change. Ray instinctively reached for his weapon, but stopped midway as he watched in stunned silence. The creature's fur receded, its body shrinking, reshaping, until what lay before him was not an animal at all. It was a woman, a breathtaking alien woman with golden eyes and shimmering silver skin, weak but alive. She blinked, looking up at him with a mixture of exhaustion and gratitude. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. "You saved me." Ray's heart pounded in his chest. His mind raced with 1,000 questions, but one thing was certain: his life had just changed forever. The transformation begins. Ray's breath caught in his throat. He stared at the woman lying before him, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. Only moments ago, she had been a wounded creature, a strange, silver-streaked beast dying in the jungle. And now she was something else entirely. Her golden eyes, once clouded with pain, blinked slowly as they met his. They were luminous, glowing faintly even in the dim light of his tent. Her long, silver-white hair fanned out around her delicate features, and her skin shimmered, reflecting the light like liquid metal. Ray took a step back, heart pounding. "What the hell?" he muttered under his breath. The woman stirred, wincing as she tried to move. The bandages he had wrapped around her side were still there, but the deep wound underneath was already closing, the golden glow fading into smooth, flawless skin. She looked down at herself, confusion flickering across her face. Then, slowly, she turned her gaze back to him. "You saved me," she whispered again, her voice barely more than a breath. Ray swallowed hard. "You were dying," he said cautiously. "I wasn't gonna let you bleed out in the middle of the jungle." Her golden eyes softened, and she exhaled shakily. "You don't understand what you've done." Ray crossed his arms. "Yeah, enlighten me." She hesitated, glancing down at her own hands as if she was still adjusting to her own body. Then she slowly sat up, wincing slightly. The movement seemed difficult, like she wasn't used to this form, or hadn't been in it for a long time. "My name is Leora," she said finally. "I am not from this planet." Ray let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah, no kidding." She flinched at the sarcasm, and guilt pricked at him. She was clearly exhausted, vulnerable, and yet there was something about her, something powerful beneath the weakness. Lyra continued, her voice steady despite her condition. "I am the last heir to the Zypherian Empire. My people were hunted, slaughtered." She closed her eyes briefly, as if pushing away painful memories. "I was forced to hide, to take a form that would not betray me." Ray's mind raced. He had heard of the Zypherian Empire before, a once mighty civilization that had ruled dozens of systems before mysteriously vanishing from the galactic stage. But the official records said the Zypherians had been wiped out decades ago. If what she was saying was true, then she was supposed to be dead. "You mean to tell me," Ray said carefully, "that you've been pretending to be an animal all this time?" She nodded slowly. "My transformation was not complete. I was injured before I could fully shift. I was trapped between forms." She hesitated. "If you hadn't helped me, I would have died like that." Ray exhaled. He had spent years exploring different planets, encountering all sorts of strange creatures, but this was something else entirely. "And now," he asked, "what happens next?" Lyra's expression darkened. "Now, they will come for me." Ray stiffened. "Who?" She met his gaze. "The ones who destroyed my people." A sudden chill ran down his spine. Leora struggled to her feet, but her body swayed unsteadily. Ray instinctively reached out, grabbing her arm to steady her. "You're not in any shape to go anywhere," he said firmly. "You need rest." She looked at him for a long moment before finally nodding, exhaustion winning over pride. Ray helped her sit back down, then ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "All right, let's break this down. You're a princess. You're being hunted. And now, because I saved you, I'm probably on their radar too. Leora lowered her gaze. I did not mean to drag you into this. Ray let out a short laugh. Too late for that. Just as he was about to say more, a deep, distant sound rumbled through the jungle. A vibration, low and unnatural, rippled through the ground beneath them. Ray's stomach twisted. What was that? Leora's expression hardened. She closed her eyes, her fingers twitching as if she could sense something unseen. Then she opened them again, and what he saw there made his blood run cold. They found me. A sharp mechanical whirring filled the air, growing louder by the second. Drones. Ray had been on enough missions to recognize the sound of a search party. Whoever was after her, they were already here. His instincts screamed at him to move. Can you run? He asked, grabbing his rifle. Leora nodded, though she was still unsteady. I will try. Ray didn't hesitate. He grabbed his pack, slung it over his shoulder, and pulled her to her feet. Then we go. Now. The sound of the drones grew louder, moving fast. Ray pushed aside the tent flap, peering into the jungle. The trees cast eerie shadows under the moon's glow, but he could already see red scanning lights flickering through the foliage. They had minutes, maybe less. Leora gripped his wrist, and when he turned to look at her, she wasn't scared. Despite her exhaustion, her golden eyes burned with determination. If we survive this, she said softly, I will owe you my life. Ray smirked. Let's focus on surviving first. Then together, they ran into the jungle, with death chasing close behind. The shocking truth. The jungle was alive with the hum of approaching drones. The red scanning lights flickered between the trees, slicing through the darkness in sweeping arcs. Ray Carter moved fast, pushing through thick undergrowth, his grip firm around Leora's wrist. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her body still weak from the transformation, but she kept up as best as she could. The sound of mechanical wings slicing through the air sent a cold shiver down Ray's spine. The drones were closing in. Ray had been in life-or-death situations before, but this was new. Running through an alien jungle with a shape-shifting princess while being hunted by unknown enemies wasn't exactly the kind of adventure he had signed up for. Leora stumbled. Ray caught her, pulling her up without stopping. You okay? She nodded, though her glowing golden eyes flickered with exhaustion. I just need a moment. Ray didn't like the sound of that. They didn't have a moment. A sudden burst of energy shot past them, striking the nearby tree. The bark exploded in a flash of light, sending burning debris flying. Ray ducked instinctively, shielding Leora. Damn it, they're shooting at us. Leora pressed a trembling hand to her temple. They are not trying to kill me yet. They want me alive. Ray glanced at her sharply. Well, they sure don't mind killing me. Another energy bolt tore through the air, slicing through the dense jungle. Ray grabbed Leora and yanked her down just in time to avoid a direct hit. We need to lose them, he said, scanning the terrain. His eyes landed on a deep ravine up ahead. A narrow bridge of fallen trees stretched across it. It was risky, but so was staying here. He turned to Leora. Can you make it across? She followed his gaze, eyes widening. Then, without hesitation, she nodded. Ray took off first, leaping onto the unsteady logs and sprinting across. The bridge creaked dangerously under his weight, but he didn't slow down. Halfway across, he turned to see Leora following close behind. Then, a drone burst through the trees, its targeting system locking onto her. Ray's eyes widened. Leora, jump. Without thinking, she leaped forward just as a beam of energy blasted through the logs beneath her. The bridge collapsed, sending shattered wood crashing into the ravine below. Ray lunged, catching her just in time. He pulled her up, gripping her tightly before they both collapsed onto solid ground. For a moment, they just lay there, catching their breath. Then Ray sat up, watching as the drones hovered on the other side, unable to cross. Leora let out a shaky exhale. That was close. Ray gave her a look. Too close. He glanced back at the wreckage. They had bought themselves time, but not much. He turned back to Leora. Eyes serious. You need to tell me the truth. Who are these people? What do they want with you? Leora sat up, rubbing her arms as if she were suddenly cold. She hesitated, then finally spoke. They are Zephyrians. Ray frowned. I thought your people were wiped out. Leora's golden eyes darkened. Most of them were, but not all. Ray didn't interrupt. He could tell she was fighting to explain something painful. Leora continued. My father was the last king of Zephyria. He ruled with wisdom, but there were those who wanted power for themselves. The Zephyrian Council betrayed him, siding with an enemy fleet that promised them dominion over other worlds. Her voice grew quiet. They slaughtered my family, my people. I was only a child, hidden away by loyal guardians, but they found me. I barely escaped with my life. Ray exhaled. And now they're here to finish the job. Leora nodded. Yes, and if they take me back, they won't just kill me. They will use me. Ray's grip on his rifle tightened. Use you how? She hesitated, then looked up at him with quiet intensity. I am the last royal Zephyrian with pure blood. My DNA holds the key to controlling the lost Zephyrian technology, the kind of power that could bring an empire back from extinction. Ray blinked. Wait, you're saying they need you to unlock some kind of ancient weapon? Leora nodded grimly. Yes, and if they succeed, the entire galaxy will suffer. Ray let out a slow breath. This wasn't just about her survival. This was about something much bigger. He ran a hand through his hair. All right, let's say I believe you. What's the plan? You can't just keep running forever. Leora looked at him, a spark of determination lighting up her golden eyes. There is a way to fight back. Ray raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. She took a deep breath. Asterisk, asterisk, my father's greatest ship. Asterisk, asterisk, the star-forged crown, was hidden before the fall of our empire. It is still out there, waiting. If I can reach it, I can reclaim what was lost. Ray folded his arms. And where exactly is this legendary ship? Leora's lips parted slightly, and for the first time, uncertainty flashed across her face. I don't know. Ray groaned. Great, just great. Leora held up a hand. But I know where to start. Ray sighed. That's better than nothing. Where? Leora's gaze turned to the night sky. The ruins of my home. Zephyria's capital was turned to dust, but my father left something behind. Something only I can access. Ray glanced back toward the jungle, where the distant hum of drones was fading. For now. He exhaled and turned to face her fully. All right, princess. Looks like we're going on a treasure hunt. Leora's lips curled into the smallest smile. You are an unusual human, Ray Carter. Ray smirked. Yeah, I get that a lot. But deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. The Zephyrians wouldn't stop hunting them. And if Leora was right, they were running out of time. Because somewhere in the ruins of a dead empire, a forgotten warship was waiting. And it might just be the key to saving or dooming the galaxy. The chase through the jungle. The jungle was dark, the thick canopy above blotting out most of the starlight. Ray Carter moved quickly, keeping his steps light and silent. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and alien vegetation, but something else lingered beneath it, something unnatural. The hum of the Zephyrian drones had vanished, but Ray wasn't fooled. The moment they had crossed the ravine, the machines had backed off, but that didn't mean their pursuers had given up. They were regrouping, strategizing. The next attack wouldn't be as sloppy. Leora walked beside him, her movements graceful but weary. She was still recovering from the transformation, her body adjusting to her humanoid form after spending so long trapped as an animal. She hadn't spoken much since she revealed the truth about her past. Ray couldn't blame her. She had lost her family, her people, her entire kingdom. He couldn't even begin to imagine what that felt like. But now wasn't the time for emotions. Now was the time for survival. Ray stopped abruptly, raising a hand. Lyora halted beside him, instantly alert. "What is it?" she whispered. Ray didn't answer right away. Instead, he crouched low and pressed his fingers against the jungle floor. It was subtle, but he could feel it, a faint vibration running through the ground. Heavy footsteps. Multiple. Coming their way. "They're tracking us on foot now," Ray muttered. Lyora's expression hardened. "Zephyrian soldiers." Ray nodded grimly. Drones were one thing, but Zephyrian infantry were another problem entirely. They were highly trained, ruthless, and heavily armed. If they caught up, this wouldn't be a chase anymore. It would be an execution. "We need to move, fast," Ray said, rising to his feet. But before they could take another step, a sudden hissing sound filled the air. A split second later, something whizzed past Ray's ear, embedding itself in a tree just inches from his head. A black, needle-like projectile. Ray didn't need to examine it to know what it was. Zephyrian spike rounds, silent, razor-sharp, and laced with a paralytic toxin strong enough to stop a charging beast in seconds. "Move," Ray shouted. Lyora didn't hesitate. They both broke into a sprint, weaving through the trees as more spike rounds zipped through the air. The Zephyrians had found them. Ray ducked under a thick branch, his boots pounding against the jungle floor. The terrain was uneven, and the thick foliage made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Perfect for an ambush. As if on cue, a dark figure dropped from the trees ahead of them, landing in a crouch. Before Ray could react, the soldier lunged. Ray barely had time to sidestep, grabbing his rifle and swinging it like a club. The stock connected with the soldier's helmet with a sickening crack, sending him sprawling into the dirt. But there was no time to celebrate. Two more Zephyrian soldiers emerged from the shadows, their weapons raised. Ray didn't think. He grabbed Lyora's wrist and yanked her into a sharp turn, diving into the undergrowth. The soldiers opened fire, energy rounds searing through the air, just inches from their heads. Lyora's breathing was ragged, but she wasn't slowing down. If anything, she seemed to be getting stronger, her movements more fluid, more precise. Ray glanced at her mid-stride. "You holding up?" She met his gaze, her golden eyes blazing. "I am fine. Keep running." Ahead of them, the jungle opened into a clearing. At the far end, a massive tree with twisting roots rose from the ground. Its trunk split into an opening wide enough for them to slip through. Ray didn't question it. They ran straight for it. Just as they reached the tree, Lyora grabbed his shoulder, forcing him to stop. Ray turned, confused. "What are you doing?" "They're right behind us." Lyora placed a hand on the bark of the tree. Instantly, the air shimmered. A faint ripple, almost like heat distortion, spread outward. Ray's eyes widened as the entrance of the tree seemed to vanish into thin air. "Get inside," Lyora urged. Ray didn't argue. He followed her through the illusion, slipping into the darkness just as a group of Zephyrian soldiers burst into the clearing. From their perspective, the tree was nothing more than solid wood. The entrance was gone. Ray held his breath, gripping his rifle tightly as the soldiers scanned the area. One of them, a tall figure clad in sleek black armor, stepped forward. The Zephyrian commander. Ray could tell immediately. The way he moved, the way the other soldiers stood at attention. It was clear he was the one in charge. The commander tilted his head, as if listening. For a moment, Ray thought they were done for. Then the commander muttered something in an alien language, and the soldiers fanned out, continuing the search elsewhere. Ray let out a slow breath. They were safe. For now. Lyora stepped away from the tree, her body trembling slightly. The illusion had cost her energy. Ray placed a hand on her shoulder. That was incredible. She gave him a tired smile. Zephyrian magic. It is difficult, but effective. Ray raised an eyebrow. Magic. Leora chuckled softly. Your people call it that. To mine, it is simply knowledge. Ray shook his head. Whatever it is, it just saved our lives. Lyra's expression turned serious again. We must keep moving. They will not give up. Ray nodded. Then let's find this lost warship of yours. As they disappeared deeper into the jungle, one thing was certain. This was far from over. The Zephyrians wouldn't stop. They wanted Leora alive. And if what she had told him was true, the entire galaxy was in danger. The revelation and a desperate plan. The jungle was silent again. Not because the danger had passed, but because something worse was coming. Ray could feel it. The way the air hung thick and unmoving. The way even the nocturnal creatures had gone quiet. It was an unnatural stillness. Ray and Leora moved swiftly through the underbrush, the dense foliage offering them some protection. But it wouldn't last. The Zephyrian soldiers wouldn't stop hunting. The drones had fallen back, but that only meant the real hunters were on their way. As they ran, Ray kept stealing glances at Leora. She looked stronger now, more balanced. Whatever magic, no, technology, she had used to disguise the entrance to the tree had taken a toll on her, but she was recovering fast. Too fast. She caught him staring. You have questions. Ray smirked. I always have questions. Leora gave him a small, tired smile. Then ask. Ray took a deep breath as they slowed to a walk. How exactly does this whole shape-shifting princess thing work? Because I've fought aliens before, but I've never seen one turn from a dying animal into, well, you. Lyra's expression darkened slightly. It is not simple. Zephyrians were once a proud empire, but we were more than warriors. We were creators, architects of energy and matter. She glanced at her hands. Our people discovered a way to rewrite our own biology, to become something greater than flesh. We could shift, adapt, survive in any form. But only the royal bloodline could fully command this gift. Ray raised an eyebrow. So what? You're some kind of living weapon. Leora hesitated. Not exactly. Her voice was quieter now. I was meant to be a ruler, not a soldier. But when the betrayal happened, I had no choice. I had to become something else. I had to survive. Ray nodded. He understood that. He had seen it before. Good people forced into wars they never wanted. It didn't matter what species you were. Survival changed you. All right, he said. Let's say I believe all of this. What does that mean for us right now? Leora stopped walking and turned to face him. Her golden eyes burned with intensity. It means we have to find the Starforged crown. Ray folded his arms. Right. The lost Zephyrian warship. The one you don't know the location of. Leora shook her head. Not exactly. I do not know where it is, but my father left a failsafe. A beacon that only I can activate. Ray frowned. And where's this beacon? She turned, pointing through the trees. In the ruins of Zephyria. Ray let out a long sigh. Of course it is. Zephyria was a dead world. When the Empire fell, its homeworld had been reduced to rubble. No ships traveled there anymore. No one lived there. It was a graveyard. A battlefield frozen in time. And now, they had to go back. Ray ran a hand through his hair. Okay. Let's say we actually make it there. What happens next? Leora's jaw tightened. The beacon will activate the ship. If it still exists, it will come. Ray stared at her. And if it doesn't? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Ray exhaled. All right. How do we get off this planet? Leora hesitated for just a moment before answering. There is a facility nearby. A Zephyrian outpost, long abandoned. But I believe its portal drive may still function. Ray's head snapped up. Portal drive. As in a teleportation gate. Leora nodded. Ray whistled low. Damn, now you're speaking my language. Portal drives were insanely rare. Most were destroyed after the Great War because of how dangerous they were, but if they could find one that still worked. We could make it to Zephyria in an instant, Leora said. Ray's pulse quickened. This plan might actually work, but there was a problem. If it's a Zephyrian outpost, he said, that means the Zephyrians will know about it too. Leora's expression was grim. Yes, they will be expecting us. Ray let out a slow breath. Then we better get there first. The first sign of trouble. They moved quickly, covering ground as fast as they could. The jungle began to thin, the terrain shifting. The ground turned rocky, the plant life becoming sparser. They were nearing the old ruins. Then, Leora froze. Ray immediately raised his rifle. What? She didn't speak. Instead, she closed her eyes, her fingers trembling slightly as she pressed them to her temple. Ray watched in uneasy silence. This was something new. When she opened her eyes again, her face was pale. They are already here. Ray's grip tightened on his weapon. How many? Leora's voice was tight. Too many. Ray cursed. He should have known they wouldn't have much of a head start. We need a new plan, he said. If they're already at the outpost, we can't just walk in. We need to. A sharp crack split the air. A gunshot. Ray grabbed Leora and pulled her to the ground just as a bolt of plasma seared over their heads. The ambush had begun. Shadows moved between the rocks. At least 5 soldiers, weapons raised, closing in fast. Ray didn't hesitate. He rolled to the side and fired. His rifle kicked against his shoulder as his shot took one of them in the chest, sending him sprawling. But the others kept coming. Leora's hands glowed with golden energy. With a flick of her wrist, she sent a shockwave outward, knocking 2 of them off their feet. Ray used the opening to grab Leora's hand and run. The outpost was close. If they could just make it inside. More soldiers appeared ahead of them. Ray skidded to a stop, raising his rifle. We're surrounded. Leora's breath was steady. No, not yet. Her golden eyes flashed. Before Ray could react, she placed her hand on his chest. A surge of energy passed through him. The world shattered into light. The leap into the unknown. When Ray's vision cleared, they were somewhere else. He gasped, staggering, his brain struggling to comprehend what had just happened. Leora stood beside him, swaying slightly. She looked exhausted. Ray looked around. They were inside an ancient structure, the walls carved with glowing symbols. And in the center of the room, a portal drive. It was massive, a circular gate covered in old Zephyrian markings, and it was still active. Ray stared. You just teleported us. Leora smiled weakly. A fraction of my power. Ray let out a breathless chuckle. Remind me never to piss you off. Leora stepped forward, placing her hand on the control panel. The portal hummed to life. Ray took a deep breath. They were about to travel to a dead world, to the heart of a fallen empire. And if the Zephyrians followed them, this would be their last stand. The final stand. The portal hummed with power, ancient runes flickering to life along its massive circular frame. A swirling vortex of blue and silver energy formed in the center, its surface rippling like liquid metal. The gateway to Zephyria was open. Ray Carter had seen many things in his life. War-torn planets, battlefields littered with wreckage, alien species both hostile and friendly. But standing before a functioning Zephyrian portal drive was something else entirely. Leora stood beside him, her golden eyes glowing faintly as she pressed her palm against the console. Sweat trickled down her temple, and her breathing was shallow. The teleportation earlier had drained her. Ray's grip on his rifle tightened. He had to protect her. Can you hold it open? He asked. She exhaled. Not for long. Ray's gut tightened. That was a problem. Because the Zephyrian soldiers were coming. The enemy arrives. A sharp clang echoed from the entrance of the ruined outpost. Ray turned, rifle raised. His pulse pounded in his ears. The walls around them were cracked, old symbols carved into the stone now faded with time. But the structure was still intact, and right now, it was their only cover. Then he heard it. The sound of metal boots striking stone. Zypherian elites. Leora flinched. They sent the executioners. Ray stiffened. He knew that name. Everyone in the galaxy did. The Zypherian executioners were not ordinary soldiers. They were something else, something worse. Modified, enhanced, nearly impossible to kill. Ray turned back to Leora. You sure you want to do this? We can still run. Leora met his gaze. Her golden eyes burned with quiet fury. I am done running. Ray nodded. All right then. He rolled his shoulders, checking his ammo. Let's make them regret coming. The battle begins. A plasma grenade came first, rolling through the doorway. Ray barely had time to react before he grabbed Leora and dove behind a fallen pillar. The grenade detonated, sending shockwaves through the chamber. The walls cracked further, dust and debris raining down. Then the executioners stepped inside. There were 5 of them, their armor dark as night, their faces hidden beneath sleek helmets. Their weapons hummed with lethal energy. They didn't speak. They didn't hesitate. They were here to kill. Ray didn't wait. He fired the first shot, his rifle kicking hard against his shoulder as the plasma bolt streaked toward the nearest enemy. It slammed into their chest plate, only for the armor to absorb the impact. Ray cursed. They had shields. The executioners opened fire. Deadly beams of violet plasma lit up the room, scorching stone and metal alike. Ray rolled, barely dodging the shot that would have burned straight through him. He fired again, aiming for the gaps in their armor. One of the executioners staggered, but it wasn't enough. Leora lifted her hands. Golden energy burst from her fingertips, colliding with the lead executioner. The air crackled as the impact sent the soldier flying across the room, crashing into a crumbling wall. Ray smirked. Nice hit. Leora didn't answer. She was already moving. One of the executioners lunged at her, a vibroblade humming in his grip. Ray reacted instantly. He swung his rifle like a club, slamming it into the attacker's helmet. The executioner staggered, and in that brief opening, Leora struck. She raised her hand and whispered something in her native tongue. The air shimmered. A burst of golden energy erupted, spearing straight through the soldier's armor. The executioner collapsed, lifeless. But they still weren't winning. The remaining executioners were adapting, moving faster, dodging Leora's attacks. They knew how to fight against Zypherian energy. And worse, more of them were coming. Ray gritted his teeth. We need to go. Now. Leora clenched her fists. I just need more time. Ray turned to the portal. The swirling vortex of energy was still unstable. Leora was holding it open, but she couldn't fight and control the portal at the same time, which meant Ray had to buy her that time. The last stand. Ray dropped his rifle. Instead, he reached for the Zypherian soldier's fallen blade. A sleek, glowing weapon still humming with deadly power. One of the executioners charged at him. Ray met him head-on. The blade clashed against the executioner's shield, sending sparks flying. Ray gritted his teeth, putting all his strength into his attack. He wasn't a sword fighter, but he knew how to fight dirty. He feinted left. The executioner *** moved to block. ***, but Ray suddenly kicked out, smashing his boot into the soldier's knee. The shield flickered. Ray didn't hesitate. He drove the blade straight into the weak spot at the soldier's neck. The executioner collapsed, unmoving. Ray exhaled sharply. That was 2 down. But the others were closing in. Leora cried out. Ray's head snapped up just in time to see one of the executioners grab her by the throat. Something inside him snapped. Without thinking, he charged. The executioner raised his weapon, but Ray was faster. He grabbed the fallen soldier's rifle, aimed, and fired point blank. The plasma round ripped straight through the executioner's helmet, sending his body crashing to the floor. Lyra gasped, staggering back. Free. Ray caught her. You okay? She nodded, her golden eyes blazing. The portal. It's ready. Ray turned. The vortex was stable now. A direct gateway to Zephyria. But they had no time to celebrate. The remaining executioners weren't stopping. More were coming, shadows filling the entrance. Ray turned to Leora. Go. She shook her head. Not without you. Ray clenched his jaw. They couldn't win this fight. He grabbed her wrist. Together. Then, with one last look at their pursuers, they leaped into the portal. The fall into darkness. The moment they entered, the world shifted. Colors blurred. Time stretched. Ray felt like he was falling through an endless void. Then, impact. He hit the ground hard, rolling across cold stone. His vision spun. Lyra landed beside him, gasping for breath. Ray pushed himself up, his eyes widening. They weren't in the jungle anymore. They were standing in the ruins of a dead empire, Zephyria, and someone was waiting for them. A shadow moved in the distance. Leora froze. Her voice was barely above a whisper. No, it cannot be. Ray's gut twisted, because standing before them, in ancient Zephyrian armor, was a man who should have been dead. Lyra's golden eyes filled with shock and fear. My brother. Escape and the beginning of a new legacy. The ruins of Zephyria stretched before them, a ghost city bathed in cold starlight. Towering structures, once grand palaces and temples of an empire long fallen, now stood in silence, their surfaces cracked and overgrown with glowing alien vines. Faint embers of long-dead technology flickered among the rubble, like whispers of a forgotten civilization. But Ray Carter had no time to admire the view, because standing before them, wreathed in shadows, was a man who should not exist. Tall and clad in battle-worn Zephyrian armor, his silver skin gleamed under the pale glow of the ruined capital. His eyes, golden like Lyora's, but colder, harsher, locked onto them, calculating, emotionless. Ray tightened his grip on his rifle. This was wrong. Lyora had said she was the last of her people, that no one from her royal bloodline had survived the betrayal. Yet here he was. Brother. Lyora's voice trembled. Ray's stomach sank. Brother. Not a soldier. Not a high-ranking enemy commander. Blood. Family. For the first time, Ray saw something flicker across Lyora's face. Not fear, not anger, but grief. The man, her supposed brother, tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was smooth, deep, and laced with something unsettling. You should not have returned, Lyora. The words cut through the silence like a blade. Lyora took a step forward. Kieran, how are you alive? Her voice was barely a whisper. Ray glanced between them, keeping his stance firm. This was bad. Very bad. Because if her brother was alive, that meant he had survived the fall of Zephyria. And that meant he had chosen a side. Kieran took slow steps toward them, his black and silver armor glinting under the ruin's eerie glow. His golden eyes never left Lyora's. I was spared, he said, his tone emotionless, because I saw the truth. Lyora stiffened. The truth. Our father was weak. Kieran's voice grew sharper. He clung to old ways, old traditions. He believed in peace, when war was the only path to survival. Ray's fingers twitched near the trigger. He had heard this speech before. From warlords, from tyrants, from those who believed in power above all else. Lyora shook her head. You helped them, didn't you? Kieran didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. The silence was enough. Ray saw it in Lyora's face, the realization. Her brother hadn't just survived the destruction of their empire. He had betrayed it. The Zephyrians hadn't found and killed him. He had joined them. Ray exhaled sharply. Okay, So, I'm guessing we're not getting a warm family reunion here. Karen's gaze shifted to him for the first time. His expression barely changed. You should not have interfered, human. Ray smirked. Yeah, I get that a lot. Karen exhaled through his nose, almost like a sigh. Step aside. You are irrelevant. Ray's grip on his weapon tightened. Yeah, see. That's where you're wrong. Before Karen could respond, Leora moved. She raised her hand, and golden energy surged from her fingertips. A wave of raw power rippled through the air, striking toward Karen like a force of nature. But Karen didn't flinch. In an instant, he raised his own hand. And to Ray's shock, the same golden energy pulsed from his palm, colliding with Leora's attack. A shockwave exploded outward, sending dust and debris flying. Ray staggered back, shielding his eyes. Leora gasped. Karen had the same power. Her power. Ray's blood ran cold. He was just as strong as her. Karen lowered his hand, his expression almost bored. You are not the only heir to our father's gifts, Leora. Leora clenched her fists. You fight for the ones who murdered our people. Karen tilted his head. I fight for the future. Ray had heard enough. He raised his rifle and fired. The plasma round streaked toward Karen's chest, but stopped midair. Ray's heart pounded. What the hell? The energy bolt hovered, frozen in place. Then, Karen flicked his wrist. The shot reversed direction. Ray barely ducked in time as his own attack blasted past his head, striking the stone behind him. Okay. That was terrifying. Karen turned back to Leora. Surrender. Leora lifted her chin. I will never follow you. Karen sighed. Then you will die. With a single movement, he lifted his hand, and the ground cracked open beneath them. Ray grabbed Leora and pulled her back as jagged stone ruptured from the earth. The ruins trembled, the sky above flickering with unstable energy. Karen was bringing the city down on top of them. Ray didn't think, he just moved. Run. Leora didn't argue. They bolted, weaving through crumbling pillars and falling debris. The ground trembled under their feet, the ruins collapsing all around them. Behind them, Karen strode forward, untouched. His power was unnatural, unstoppable. Ray's mind raced. They couldn't win this fight. Leora suddenly grabbed his hand. Her golden eyes blazed. The ship. Ray blinked. What? The beacon. Leora's voice was urgent. If I activate it, the Starforged crown will come. Ray cursed under his breath. Then we better move faster. The ruins opened ahead of them, a massive courtyard leading to a crumbling monolith, ancient and untouched. Leora reached out her hand. The monolith came to life. Symbols ignited along its surface, golden light pouring from the cracks as the beacon pulsed. Karen's eyes widened. No. The air split open. A deep mechanical hum echoed from the sky. Ray looked up, and his breath caught. A shadow loomed overhead. Massive, ancient, unstoppable. The Starforged crown. It had answered the call. Karen took a step back. His expression, for the first time, was uncertain. Ray smirked. Yeah, you're screwed now, buddy. Leora reached for Ray's hand. Come with me. Ray hesitated for only a second. Then he grinned. Wouldn't miss it. Together, they leaped toward the rising ship, and the future of the galaxy changed forever.